The Bestiary was first introduced to Terraria back in May of 2020. However, being a prolific Terraria wiki browser, I've only opened this menu a handful of times over the past 4.5 years. There's also only 2 rewards that require more than 50% of the entries to be filled in. And as cool as the Dynamite Kitten and Universal Pylon are, they never seemed worth the effort. But recently, I've started to become a bit of a completionist. So, I've decided to finally give this sector of the game a try and register all 540 entries to my Bestiary. For those unfamiliar with the Bestiary mechanics, when you defeat an enemy, encounter a critter, or talk to an NPC, their entries are automatically logged into your Bestiary. You will then get to see what items they can drop, where they spawn, and what their stats are. But in order to help me complete this challenge, I've decided to go the summoner route, as that should help with any farming or AFKing that we'll likely be doing. I spent the first hour looting the jungle for some armor, life crystals, and the Snapthorn Whip. For my summon, I traveled to the Tundra to pick up the Flink Staff and Flink's Fur Coat. But while farming materials, the Eye of Cthulhu spawned. At this stage, I was more than equipped to deal with it, so it went down very quickly. With the Eye defeated, our first boss entry has been filled in, and as you can see from that bar down there, I've already filled in roughly 10% of the entries. However, that bar doesn't quite paint the full picture, but you'll see what I mean a little later. After the boss fight, I quickly grinded out the remaining materials for our summon gear and was visited by the traveling merchant, who sold us the Lifeform Analyzer. I was very glad to see this available in the shop so early, because there are plenty of rare entries that we'll be needing to fill in, and being able to detect them when they're off screen will be massive. Afterwards, I made my way to the dungeon to defeat Skeletron. I usually don't fight this boss so early in the run, but I wanted to get some water candles as soon as possible. And to help further increase our spawn rates when AFKing for entries, I also farmed some shark fins for battle potions. With that, our preparations are complete, and we can start actively filling in these entries. I decided to start with the Crimson biome because not only are there just 4 enemies to register, I could also get my vertebrae supplies up to help fuel the many battle potions we'll be needing for this playthrough. Now, technically speaking, we only have to kill each enemy once to get their bestiary entry, and for it to count towards the progress bar. However, to unlock things like their stats, description, and drop rates, you have to kill up to 50 enemies per entry. And being the completionist that I've just recently become, it would feel deeply unsatisfying having a 100% bestiary riddled with question marks and locked information at the end. So, I committed to completely filling in the bestiary. I must defeat every enemy enough times to entirely fill out their entries. Now, 50 enemy kills is rather easy for very common enemies like our first 3 entries in the Crimson, taking just a few minutes to complete. But what about bosses like the Brain of Cthulhu? Well, thankfully, the main bosses don't require you to kill 50 of them to unlock their full entry. As you may have noticed before with the Eye of Cthulhu, just 1 kill is sufficient to fill in their entry. This courtesy is also somewhat extended to the rare enemies, where you generally have to kill 10 or 25 of them as opposed to the full 50. But again, these are rare enemies, so by no means does that mean they're easy to fill in. Also, that is generally speaking, and oh my god, some of these kill requirements made no sense. But I'm getting ahead of myself. After just 10 minutes, we've completed the pre-Hardmode Crimson biome, which really gave me a warped perception of just how long this challenge is going to take. Things are going to slow down. A lot. From there, I traveled east to the Tundra, where I flattened out and filled in the surface to help our spawn rates. The surface Tundra has just 2 enemies, the frozen zombies that spawn during the night, and the ice slimes during the day, both of which took very little time to farm to completion. It's the underground ice biome where things get a little bit more difficult. We now have 5 enemies to register, including our first uncommon spawn, the Cyan Beetle. Due to just how many enemies we'll be needing to kill, it seemed worth the time to invest in a large farming area. Now, one fact that became evident very quickly was that the bestiary follows the tally counter rules. Unless an enemy is damaged by the player before it dies, it will not contribute towards the bestiary kill requirement. So while I had hoped to just AFK in a lava farm for most of these entries, I unfortunately had to still be at the computer to reset my summons. If not, after some time they would fly back to me and get stuck behind walls, preventing them from taking enemies before they die. But hey, while it was a little less convenient than I had hoped, the farm still worked great. It took just 20 minutes to fill in all the entries except for the Cyan Beetle. Eventually, the 25th beetle kill came and went, and I still had more information to unlock. Which meant that despite being an uncommon enemy, I still had to kill 50 of them to complete the entry. I had to sit in that farm, pseudo AFKing for this beetle for over an hour after completing the other entries to finish this biome. But with that, the only enemy that remained in the Tundra biome is the Deerclops, While I fight this boss, I want to introduce a new goal that I set for this challenge. In order for a critter to be registered in the Bestiary, it simply has to have been on your screen at some point during play, which means I can easily fill in the majority of them without even noticing. And for the golden critters, just seeing one is enough to automatically fill in every golden critter entry. In fact, way back when I killed the Eye of Cthulhu, I had already completed all 13 golden critter entries because at some point there must have been one on screen. I don't know when that happened or even which critter spawned, and it doesn't feel like I earned any of those entries. So, in addition to filling in every entry to completion, I will also commit to catching every single critter available in the game. In the Tundra, we just have the penguin to catch, and we're done. But things wouldn't remain so easy, because again, there are 13 golden critters between me and the completion of this challenge. The first of which is home to the desert biome, our next area of focus. But catching that will come later because I wanted to delay that grind as long as possible. For now, we're going to focus on the enemies. There are 2 that can spawn on the surface. However, the antlion can be found underground as well, so I just focused on defeating vultures. And 5 minutes later, we could proceed underground. Oh yeah, golfer. Okay, we have an NPC, which is new. The main thing I'm worried about at this point is the tomb crawlers, because I haven't seen one yet, and if we have to kill 50 of those for the banner, and thus the bestiary entry, that is going to suck. Unfortunately, the tomb crawlers weren't the only obstacle we had to face here. No, there's giant antlion swarmers? It turns out there are separate entries for the giant variant of antlion chargers and swarmers. After an hour of underground desert exploration, I'd killed 139 antlion chargers, but just 19 of the giant variants. For the giant swarmer, just 9 kills. Originally, I was just planning to farm out these enemies naturally as I explored the biome, but that plan had to change. This time around, I made a slight adjustment to the farm to make it more AFKable. I began situating myself above the farm and without any blocks surrounding me to allow my summons to continuously target enemies. Of course, the downside to this is that I'm vulnerable to flying enemies. However, after upgrading my armor to obsidian and getting some warding accessories, I now had enough bulk to tank them. After an hour in the farm, I had all of the giant entries completed, and also managed to kill several tomb crawlers. Over 25 in fact, which confirms that I would indeed need to kill 50 of them for the entry. So I decided to focus on something else for a bit. I slept in my bed and waited for a sandstorm. This event just has the angry tumbler in pre-Hardmode, so we'll only need the 1 sandstorm to complete it. While waiting for it, a blood moon spawned, which was great because we could now get the vampire frog staff. It took an hour of sleeping in the bed to get the sandstorm and tumbler entry, and another hour to finish up the tomb crawlers, leaving just a few critters between me and the completion of this biome. And yet, in terms of time, I was not even halfway done yet. The majority of the critters were easy enough to catch. However, the golden strider was another story. Water striders spawn on top of bodies of water provided there are sand or jungle blocks nearby. These striders are somewhat rare spawns as far as critters go, and to make matters worse, if the wind speed surpasses 20 miles per hour, they will no longer spawn. So I sat there staring at the lifeform analyzer with my water candle, battle potion, and gnome setup. Oh, and the reason I'm fishing here is because luck helps considerably when hunting down these golden critters. So I decided to fish up some oysters in hopes that I could get some luck potion ingredients while I waited. And as I alluded to earlier, I would be waiting a while. Oh my god. Oh, I don't want to mess this up. I saw it. Oh my god, it's been hours. It's been hours. There it is. I see it. Oh, there it is. Oh my god, I hated that. Okay, that's 1. I've done 1. That took so long. We're done with the desert. We're gonna go into the jungle next. So this is one of the kind of rare frogs, the mystic frog. We need the golden one, which is a lot more difficult, but yeah, if you just try and catch this, it'll teleport away. You have to throw purification powder on it, and then it becomes the slime, which we will be needing to get all of as well. Yeah, we'll figure that out when we get there. The jungle on paper is much more difficult than the desert biome to complete. However, thanks to some good fortune, that actually wouldn't be the case. Oh. No way. No way. Yes. The gold frog, that was so fast. That's a 1 in 400 base odds. We do have the gnome, but... Oh, let's go. Alright, so I didn't notice until just now while editing, but I still had my guide to critter companionship disabled here. Those vampire frogs came dangerously close to making this clip one of despair instead of joy. This came just 10 minutes after clearing out an area on the surface to farm enemies. Speaking of surface enemies, they were very easy to complete. I was able to fill in all of their entries in just 20 minutes. Well, all but one. The jungle is home to our first rare enemy, Dr. Bones. And to make matters worse, it only spawns during nighttime. So my plan was to farm the underground enemies by day and Dr. Bones by night. And to help find as many Dr. Bones as possible, I'll also be summoning blood moons to further increase its spawn rate. This also has the added benefit of getting some work done on those blood moon entries as well. Okay, second blood moon. Almost done with it, but we have our first Dr. Bones. I think we need 9 more. So I'm having a bit of trouble with taking out the hornets. They're kind of staying far away, so what I'm going to do is defeat Queen Bee, and then get the extra slot, and then I'll probably also get the imps, because we want to have some sort of range to deal with those hornets. And that seemed to do the trick. Like the underground ice biome, the underground jungle has its own version of the uncommon cyan beetle. This black beetle proved to be the most difficult entry to farm in the underground jungle. However, I was expecting that. What I was not expecting was the sheer number of hornet variants that I'd have to fill in. Seriously, why are there 6 hornet entries? And why are they so damn rare? After killing 75 normal hornets, I'd only defeated 8 of the mossy hornets. And you'd think that with how much rarer this enemy is, that I wouldn't have to kill as many as normal. But no, I still had to defeat the full 50 for all 6 iterations of this hornet. Luckily they weren't the bottleneck, as again having to kill 50 uncommon lac beetles still took longer. And after an hour of blood moons, I was finally able to kill the remaining 5 Dr. Bones, and thus complete all of the jungle enemy entries. With the golden frog already in our possession, the critter collecting went by in a matter of minutes, and we can move on to the ocean, which looked quite easy on paper. There are barely any enemies, and just 3 critters to catch. However, I was in for a rude awakening. Let's start off with the enemies. Alongside the jellyfish, crab, and shark, we have an uncommon enemy in the squid, and a rare enemy in the sea snail. I didn't even recognize a sea snail as being an enemy in this game, which should have probably set off some alarm bells, but I figured that's just because I generally didn't spend much time on the ocean floor. With a rare enemy being in this biome, I knew it would be in my best interest to make this as AFK-able as possible. However, this turned out to be rather difficult. These enemies all spawn on the seafloor, so we have to be underwater. I unfortunately cannot breathe underwater, so I made this little air pocket. The trouble is, while using this air pocket, the enemies don't aggro, and instead just stay around the edges of my screen. In order to aggro them, I had to be underwater and in line of sight, which for previously stated reasons, wasn't exactly practical. I could use Gills potions, but this is a rare enemy and I want to be able to completely AFK for it. Eventually, I came up with a solution. As I'm sure you all know, the breathing reed is an item that will prolong the amount of time before the player drowns. There's also the diving helmet, which can stack with the breathing reed. When used together, the player can hold their breath underwater for 2 minutes and 20 seconds, as opposed to the usual 23 seconds. Now, on the surface, this just sounds like a marginally better Gills potion, and it is, but that's not the part we're after. What I wasn't aware of until making this video is that these items also slow down the rate of health loss from drowning. According to the wiki, the player normally loses 17 health per second when drowning. With these 2 items, that number is reduced to just 1.4 HP per second. If we can stack enough regen to offset that health loss, we will effectively be able to breathe underwater forever. All that was left to do was to put it to the test. With that problem solved, we could start grinding. Remember when I said these kill requirements don't make sense sometimes? This sea snail is a prime example of that. As I said before, this is considered a rare enemy. It's by no means as rare as Dr. Bones, so I'm not expecting it to require 10. But 50 kills? That seems a bit steep. Alright, so we've just killed our 50th sea snail. It took a couple hours and a few blood moons, but we got there. So that means we've done every single enemy. Much more involved than I thought it would be, to be honest. That leaves just the critters. And this is actually the part I'm quite afraid of. I was doing a little bit of research, and a lot of people were saying that the golden seahorse is the rarest critter. So, yeah, I'm not looking forward to this. This whole process was excruciatingly painful. I tried absolutely every idea I could think of for a golden seahorse farm, but nothing seemed to be effective. Eventually, I started seeking help from YouTube videos and old forum posts, but they all either looked inefficient or just straight up didn't work when I tried them. I was so unsuccessful, in fact, that I somehow ended up getting the wrong golden critter. A goldfish just spawned. Okay, maybe it wasn't the worst thing in the world, but yeah, this is becoming more of a goldfish farm than anything else. What? Another one. I just ended the last recording. What do you mean? That must be way more common. There's no way that's 1 in 400. It's still 1 in 400. I didn't even know goldfish could spawn in the ocean. And it didn't stop at just 2. I was getting bombarded by golden goldfishes. Clearly, something had to change. So I went back to researching and came across this post by Dundahead777. They utilized the minecart setup and artificial body of water just above the ocean to isolate the seahorse spawns. And it worked great. I had finally found something, so huge shoutouts to you, Dunda, for this farm. One thing to note about this farm is that you have to travel quite slow on the minecart to avoid killing the seahorses. Unfortunately, we can't just use the guide to critter companionship because it will prevent the other critters from dying to the dart traps and thus lower the efficiency of the farm. And to help prevent enemy spawns, a town is situated just underneath us. But this doesn't exactly work during events like the Blood Moon, Goblin Army, or Slime Rain. Something I'd failed to realize before leaving my PC alone to farm the seahorse for 6 hours. Out of the 6-hour recording, not even 2 were spent in the farm, but something rather unexpected happened. After an hour at spawn, a golden goldfish spawned. However, it wasn't too keen on being captured, so it left. Either that, or maybe it was because it would have been likely obliterated by the slime that's been harassing me for like 20 minutes. But either way, it's fine because we already have one. What I didn't have yet was this golden bunny. This one really hurts to watch. Just a few more hops to the left and this thing could have saved me so much trouble. We were then visited by a golden bird about 20 minutes after the bunny was here. This one unfortunately had no chance of being caught, but again, interesting to see. But these past encounters all pale in comparison to the one I'm about to show you. Unlike the bird, our protagonist here decided to come on screen, and unlike the bunny and goldfish, it had no interest in turning around. Seriously though, I have no idea how this thing managed to dodge that slime so many times, but I am so grateful it did. Sadly, this is probably the easiest golden critter to get, as they drop quite readily from cans and worms. But realistically, no other critter could have made that journey. Somehow I've managed to find 2 totally separate golden critters while hunting for the seahorse. While the farm was quite efficient, it still took nearly 7 hours of sitting in this farm to find this thing. There it is. There it is. Yes, golden seahorse. Okay, that took a while, as you can see. This one was interesting because we can actually see how many it took. So 448, which is a little over the odds. I think the odds are 1 in 400. There we go. We are done with the ocean. We now have 5 golden critters, which means there's just 8 more to go. And besides the golden mouse, they all spawn in the forest biome. I'm not mentally prepared for that quite yet, so instead we'll focus on the underground and cavern entries. Speaking of the golden mouse, so I saw the golden mouse. I'm not even really farming that right now, but I don't see it. Don't want anything to kill it. Oh, there it is. Yes. Okay, we got it. But there you go. There's another golden critter. There are a ton of entries in the underground and cavern layers, including uncommons like the cochineal beetle and undead miner. But the real bottleneck of this area was the nymph. This one enemy was the reason I had to farm here for 5 hours. Despite being a rare class enemy, the nymph still required 25 kills to complete. And those 5 hours just accounts for this particular farming session. The nymph could also spawn during every other underground farming session from all of the previous biomes. When you add that all up, this enemy has easily taken the longest amount of time to complete so far. Unfortunately, the nymph isn't the only rare thing we have to worry about in this cavern lair. Have we seen Tim? No. So we haven't even seen it yet. It's not exactly the easiest one to find. However,
there are some tips to find them easier.
Tim can only spawn in the bottom half of the cavern layer, and even with battle potions and a water candle, this enemy rarely ever shows up, but courtesy of 1.3, if you equip any of the gem robe variants without the wizard hat, Tim will be 5 times as likely to spawn. But don't get it twisted, this is still a rare enemy.
Tim, that's 1. Okay, it's working.
Thankfully, this entry doesn't require 25 kills like the Nymph, we just have to defeat 10. And thanks to all of our spawn rate buffs, we were able to get it done in a little over an hour. But there's technically one more rare underground spawn that we need to complete. And unlike Tim, we'll need to kill 25 of them. The enemy I'm referencing is none other than Pinky. It can of course spawn on the surface as well, but I decided to get it out of the way now while we're already knocking out all of these rare spawns. At this point I was already at 17 out of 25, so it only took an hour of AFK. With that, there's just a few small biomes and events to deal with before we progress to hard mode. First, I farmed the underground and above ground glowing mushroom entries, defeated 50 harpies to complete the space or sky filter, farmed for about an hour in the granite mini biome, and used a hoplite statue to complete the marble biome. Going into this, I was under the impression that statues would be a game changer in filling out these entries, and while they were still of course helpful at times, they weren't nearly as impactful as I thought they'd be. They were very fast at completing any one entry, but the majority of these statue enemies are not the bottleneck of their particular biome. For instance, yes, I can complete this cave bat entry very fast, but I still need to farm extensively in the cavern layer for the undead miner and nymph. By the time those entries are complete, I will have killed hundreds if not thousands of cave bats anyway. But again, here and there, they do have their moments. For the marble biome, it was great because the hoplite is the only enemy to register in pre-hard mode. So I was able to complete that biome without even entering it. Next up, I tackled the graveyard. Because there are just 2 enemies here, both very common 1-stars, I expected this to go by very fast. But for whatever reason, the maggot zombie was way rarer than I was led to believe. It somehow took me 2 hours to kill 50 of these. To put that more into perspective, this entry took longer to complete than Tim's. After making sure to grab ourselves a maggot, we were on our way to the shimmer biome. There's just 1 enemy and 1 critter here, so initially it looked like it'd be a quick stop. However, this is also the best place to tackle the gem critters, of which there are many. There's both a bunny and squirrel variant for each of the 7 gems. 14 gem critters to be captured. With the town and our trusty water candle battle potion combo, I was able to catch them after about 40 minutes. It's super satisfying seeing them all in a row like this, which really made me look forward to putting all of the critters on display once we catch them all. And so after an hour of farming in the dungeon, a few old ones army bouts, and 2 hours of voodoo demon farming, yes, we had to kill 50 of those, I couldn't stall any longer. It was time to face the forest biome. By this point, I had already completed the surface enemies naturally, and while there are plenty of common critters to collect, it was easy enough to round them all up. The 7 golden critters are the real challenge. To start things out, I simply sat by my town spawn and waited. There are quite a few golden critters that could show up at spawn, so I figured I'd see if I could get lucky. And sure enough, I did. But I can't rely on dumb luck alone for the rest of them. Actually, never mind, that's exactly what I'm gonna do. As I mentioned before, the luck mechanic plays a big role in helping these 1 in 400 critters show up. One of the easiest ways to increase your luck is to place down a garden gnome. And actually at this point I still needed to complete this entry, so I decided to make a farm for it. I found this one from Mox's Gaming that works wonders. Interestingly enough, the video was actually marketed as a way of making gold, not so much for acquiring 25 gnomes for the bestiary. Gnomes sell for a surprising amount of gold, which is amazing because that gold can then be used to increase our luck. By throwing a platinum coin into the shimmer, you get a very significant boost to your luck. In fact, it's actually equal to the gnome's boost. Unfortunately, coin luck will decay over time, but because of how effective this gold farm is, we can afford to throw in a platinum coin once every day for this bonus. But I haven't even gone over the best part yet. The gnome is the only enemy that can spawn on this platform in front of living wood walls. The only other 2 entities that can spawn are the squirrel and bunny critters. This is usually undesirable for the farm because they can clog up the spawns and reduce the efficiency of the farm. So to deal with this, a gap is created in the platform so that the critters fall down to the surface where they eventually despawn. And the gnomes can just jump over this gap. But for us, these critters are amazing. While we sit in this farm, we can grind loads of platinum coins for effectively infinite coin luck, while also farming for the golden bunny and squirrels from all of the critters that are spawning off screen. All we have to do is stare at our life form analyzer and drop down within 12 seconds to catch the golden critter before it can despawn. And after just 20 minutes in the farm, this happened.
Oh, it works. Gold squirrel.
Yes, dude.
I'm so glad that worked. Okay. That's so awesome.
Unfortunately, we wouldn't quite stick to this pace, however, as the next golden critter didn't appear for another 3 hours. And it was another squirrel. Now you may have noticed that I have the weather radio toggled on, and there's a very good reason for that. Wind speeds heavily impact several of the bug critters. Some won't spawn if the winds are too high, and others, like the golden ladybug, won't spawn if they're too low. The golden ladybug is often regarded as the second most difficult golden critter to get, and for good reason. Ladybugs can only spawn during the windy day event, which occurs when wind speeds pick up above 20 miles per hour from 7:30 a.m. to 4:30 p.m. Furthermore, there's a 1 in 3 chance that ladybugs just won't spawn even if these prerequisites are met. And even if they do spawn, their spawn rate could be extremely low. If you're interested in exploring the ins and outs of this mechanic, then be sure to check out the wiki. But, to keep things simple, there's actually a way to re-roll the ladybug spawn rates. If you aren't seeing too many ladybugs during the windy day event, or none at all you have to do is save and exit, then load up your world again. You can keep doing this until they start spawning frequently, which makes this grind much more tolerable. From here on, anytime I see the wind speeds above 20 miles per hour during the day, I will drop everything that I'm doing and start farming ladybugs. Naturally spawned ladybugs also give the player a major luck boost when you pass over them, so this helps greatly for the other critters as well, even if we don't find the golden ladybug. Anyways, back to the Gnome Farm.
Gold bunny, yes, dude. There it is. Yes. I got like 6 squirrels before that, but we're done.
I really wish I caught that gold bunny from way back when I died during the Seahorse Farm, because that took hours and hours. With that frustratingly long bunny hunt complete, that puts us at 9 out of 13 golden critters caught. I sadly lost the footage of finding the golden butterfly, but the butterfly is very similar spawn mechanics to the ladybugs, in that you can refresh your world to reroll butterfly spawn rates. The only difference being that if it's a windy day, the ladybugs will spawn instead of the butterflies. Now, I know how this looks, but I was not about to spend several more hours going for another one, and also if I wanted to cheat one in, I would have opted for one of the more annoying ones, like the grasshopper. To find grasshoppers, you simply have to destroy grass. Just make sure you have the Guide to Critter Companionship enabled. Unfortunately, they don't exactly spawn frequently, and with the gold version being a 1 in 400, we were going to need a lot of grass. But even with a sky bridge of grass tiles, you still have to wait for it to grow back before you can try again. This takes about 1 day, so I decided to check the bridge for the golden grasshopper, then sleep through the day to try it again, stopping only for windy day events where we would keep checking for ladybugs.
Oh, golden grasshopper. No, 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 no. Holy shit. That was almost so bad. I almost got fucked by that harpy. Okay. Alright, we're good. Grasshopper. We need 2 more. Dragonfly and ladybug. And then we're good.
For the golden dragonfly, I actually took advice from the wiki. Dragonflies, unlike most entities, can spawn on screen, provided there is a cattail nearby. You then just have to build a wall to keep enemies off screen and have them despawn. This farm worked exceptionally well, and I highly recommend it. It's worth noting that dragonflies can only spawn during the day, and when wind speeds are below 20 miles per hour. Which is great, because we still need a ladybug. If the winds are below 20, we farm this dragonfly, and if they're above 20, we farm the ladybug.
Oh. Golden ladybug, dude. I hate how I can't see it. Oh, it's there. Okay, it's underground. I am recording this. That was fine. When you reset the days for this, it goes by really fast. That being said, I think we're very much over odds for this. Yeah, 781 I have caught here. It was almost twice the amount you expected.
With that, there was just 1 golden critter left.
I wasn't recording. I literally just got here. This is like 5 seconds later. I guess because of the luck boost from the ladybugs means it was easy. Nice. Okay. That's pretty funny. I wasn't recording still. But I don't care. I at least showed catching it. This was the same exact day that I got the ladybug. But there we go. All golden critters. I think we have every critter in pre-hard mode. I'm going to do a quick count and double check, but that's so good, dude.
Before we progress to hard mode, we need to talk about statues some more. The vicious critter variants can be quite pesky to fill in. They are fairly rare during a blood moon, and you have to kill 50 of them for the entries. After completing everything else in pre-hard mode, I had only defeated a handful of these vicious critters. Now, you can always convert regular critters into the Crimson variants with vicious powder, however, this isn't exactly the most practical approach either, unless you make use of statues. This way, we can quickly spawn each critter, isolate them into one spot, and then use just one powder to convert up to 6 of them. But we're not done there with the statues. We can also use them to complete a few of the hard mode entries early, arguably the most notable being the Medusa statue. It's quite a rare spawn and will also allow us to finish the marble biome without ever having stepped foot in one.
So, at long last, we are done with pre-hard mode. So here are all our critters. Now we have one spot here for jellyfish. These aren't really critters, they're bait, but they're just here to fill out all the furniture and stuff. And then we have the prismatic lacewing here, and I think the truffle worm goes here. And that's it. So just 2 more critters in hard mode, and then we're good. So pretty cool to see them all on display like this. Now we can look at our bestiary. So I think this is as best we can do. I'm at 50%. According to the wiki, we can get up to like 54% without bringing over items. However, I think this has to include some special seeds because, again, I'm not really close to that number. 4% might seem like we're pretty close away, but that's, 4% of like 500 enemies. So that's a lot that we're missing. I think that could be to do with the corruption enemies. I was only able to get the Eater of Souls with the statue. All the other corruption enemies I don't have access to. You can, with the special seeds, get access to those, but I opted not to go with those for this run. And honestly, I don't know what else. I have no idea what else. But every single one of these entries, starting at this gnome, we have a lot of gnomes killed. But every one of these entries is complete, which is really cool to see. It's so satisfying flicking through all these and seeing that every single one of these enemies, every single one of these variants has been completed to perfection. And we're 50% of the way there, which is a pretty fitting number. Now, I'm probably missing something, but I've scoured the wiki, looked through all the events, and from what I can tell, there's not more that I can do. I did the statues for the hard mode enemies that we can access, and that's the best I'm going to be able to do. So with that, we have one more pre-hard mode enemy left, which, well, I guess 2, because the Hungry probably have a slot as well. So 2 more slots for the Wall Flesh fight. So I'll get that underway. Oh, did I forget? Oh no, I think I forgot water walking, and that was dumb. It's just got a lot harder. Okay, we're fine. I can't believe it took that long to notice, but I just did that without obsidian skin or anything. But we're good. We are into hard mode.
It took 84 hours to get to this point, but now that we're in hard mode, we can make some optimizations to help speed things along. The first optimization being the blade staff, which I have been eagerly waiting for. As I mentioned before, in order to get credit for these bestiary entries, we have to tag the enemy before it dies to lava or traps. However, with pre-hard mode summons, that meant we had to stand out in the open in all of our farms if we wanted to AFK them, which wasn't at all practical. And due to how much harder enemies hit in hard mode and being a squishy summoner, this really isn't an option anymore. But that's where the blade staff comes in. Unlike the minions in pre-hard mode, the enchanted daggers are stationed above the player's head when not attacking anything. This means we can now safely sit underneath some blocks in a farm and still get credit for the kills. Speaking of the farm, we've also greatly optimized things there too. While searching for ways to speed this up, I stumbled across this farm by CJHeath. It utilizes a hoik to quickly transport spawned enemies into a kill chamber, and also an artificial underground desert biome to further increase spawn rates. This thing is wildly effective and quite easy to build, so I highly recommend trying it out. I was able to get the bulk of the underground and cavern entries done in just a few minutes. The rock golem took a little longer to complete, but again, it wasn't bad at all thanks to this farm. One of the 2 that we're missing is the Rune Wizard, the hard mode version of Tim. It hits like an absolute truck and is arguably one of the rarest spawns in the entire game. To make matters worse, our gem robe trick has no effect on the Rune Wizard. We just have to rely on the water candle and battle potions. I spent 40 minutes going back and forth on this minecart and was only able to find a single Rune Wizard. So I decided to really put our new farm design to the test and built another one in the bottom half of the cavern layer to allow the Rune Wizard to spawn. I was a little worried I wouldn't be able to AFK for this enemy, thinking that it might be able to teleport out of the farm before it could get hoiked. But it turns out I had nothing to worry about.
At some point, a Rune Wizard was indeed killed. I started this, at 2 kills, and we now have 3. I think we gotta get to 10, and I'll probably have this up for like half hour. But the good news is this is completely AFKable, which is great because this is a very rare spawn and it will probably take hours. Okay, so we're done. We have 13 kills. We only need 10. Yeah, farm worked flawlessly. Didn't die once. Left the game on while I was eating, and we're done. So really cool. Definitely worth the time because that still took like over an hour with this really efficient farm.
Now that we're in hard mode and are able to fully complete each biome, it was much easier to see what we missed in pre-hard mode by using these filters. In the underground, we missed the dynamite bunny, which is a critter that we actually had to craft. So it didn't come up on any of the biome or event wiki pages, which is how I was navigating this challenge. And similarly, Torch God was the other entry that I missed because again, it didn't show up on any of those wiki pages.
There we go. Easy. We are done with the entirety of the underground and cavern, and that puts us at 60.19%.
Next up, I targeted the ice biome. All we have to do is add 300 blocks of snow to our farm and change the spawn area blocks to either ice or snow to get tundra spawns. And with no rare or uncommon spawns to complete, this area was finished up incredibly fast. I then traveled to the surface to finish up the tundra. There are only 3 enemies to deal with here: the ice elemental and wolf, which are very easy to fill in, and the ice golem, a blizzard only spawn. And despite being a blizzard only spawn and having a 5-star rarity, I still had to kill 25 of these to complete this entry. It took a ton of time sleeping in the bed and 2 hours to complete, but eventually we got it done.
We have everything complete here.
Well, kind of. There's 3 entries at the bottom, but they're all NPCs, one of which is the tax collector, which we can and will get right now, but the other 2 are Santa Claus and the cyborg, which will have to come later. And seeing as we were in hell anyways, I figured we might as well finish up that area too, because there are only 2 new entries: the Tortured Soul, which we've already encountered, and the Red Devil. After sinking so much time into this project, it was incredibly satisfying to finally have full areas finished off and crossed off the list. The next on that list is the Crimson. I spent a few minutes on the surface to finish up those entries, then made my way down to our farm and converted it to a Crimson biome. And this was an area I expected to spend a lot of time in because we had to kill 50 Crimson Axis. But thanks to how efficient our farm was, that only took about an hour to do. The only trouble with this area was the Crimson Mimic because it prevented me from completely AFKing this area, but completing the actual Mimic entry itself was very easy. All I had to do was use all the Souls of Night that I'd recently accumulated and put them towards Keys of Night and then farm 2 down at a time.
There we go. That's done, which means we are done with the Crimson biome.
We now also have access to the Corruption biome in all of those entries. And seeing how easy the Crimson biome was to complete, I figured we should give it a go. Everything was going smoothly until we made it to the underground. The main issue we faced was the Clinger spawns. They would pile up off screen and slow the farm down to a screeching halt. Without strong traps or sentries to take them out, AFKing is off the table here. Despite this, I persevered and finished up the bulk of the corruption spawns. It was only then that I realized I had made a major mistake. In that entire farming session, I only managed to kill 4 Devourers. I had 30 Mimic kills, over 50 Hammer kills, and just 4 Devourers. The Devourer is quite a rare spawn normally in pre-hard mode, but it gets even rarer when you progress to hard mode. And because a rare Crimson variant of this enemy doesn't exist, it would have saved so much time if I had just gone with the Corruption World instead and farmed it in pre-hard mode. In the end, I decided to postpone farming this enemy until I felt more equipped to deal with it. In the meantime, I turned to the desert, because there are some Crimson and Corruption variants to deal with here as well. None of these entries caused us any issues, and I was very grateful to see that the Dune Splicers spawned readily during the Sandstorm event, because I didn't want a repeat of my struggles with the Tomb Crawler from pre-hard mode. Within the Sandstorm event, we also had to complete the Sandshark and its evil variants, which took 1 to 2 Sandstorms each, and then on top of that, we had the Sandstorm Elemental to deal with as well. This is a rare enemy that can only spawn during an event that rarely happens, and yet, it still needs 25 kills. There were some Sandstorms that only spawned 1 Elemental. Then I was back to the bed to hope and pray another Sandstorm would start up soon. Yeah, this one was rough, but once we completed the Sharks, I decided to leave the rest of the Elementals for later, because we'll be back to grinding Sandstorms once we move on to the Hallow biome, for the Crystal Thresher, the hallowed variant of the Sand Shark. But no more delaying, it was time to suit up and figure out a way to finish off that Devourer entry. So, I defeated the mechs in Plantera, which gave us access to the post-plant dungeon, and the Pumpkin Moon, which means loads of summer upgrades like the Raven Staff, Spooky Armor, and Necromantic Scroll, all of which will help us process enemies much faster in our farm. After killing Golem, we got the Super Dart Traps, which can then couple with the Frost Hydra Staff to easily deal with any clingers that are spawning off screen. And the new setup worked wonders.
Oh shit, wait. Am I done the Devourer? Oh, I so am, it's only 25. I thought I was gonna have to do 50. Oh, that's so good. I think I'm done the corruption now.
I guess I just started to expect the worst case scenario here, but I was incredibly relieved to see that 25 was enough to fill this entry. It was now time to complete the Hallow biome. This biome, for the most part, was in line with the Crimson's difficulty. Completing all of the underground entries took about an hour. Once again, the cursed weapon type enemy was the bottleneck here. Otherwise, it would have been even faster. As for the above ground entries, I decided to tackle them in the Hallow Desert, so I could also complete the Hallow Desert variants at the same time. This includes the Light Mummy and the Crystal Thresher during Sandstorms. And of course, we can now also finish up the Sand Elemental. But the Elemental wasn't actually the entry that we were waiting on for the longest here. Far from it. While sleeping for Sandstorms, I was also sleeping for rain. This is because the rare Rainbow Slime enemy can also spawn during the rain. While they're of course not as rare as a Sand Elemental, they unfortunately need double the kills for this entry. That's 50 kills for this rare enemy that can only spawn during the rain event. These rare event enemies were absolutely killing me. Eventually, after several hours of farming, we had a Rainbow Slime and Sand Elemental banners, and we could move on. With that, we just had to defeat the Empress of Light, during daytime of course for the Terra Prisma, build a house for the Princess NPC, and catch an extra Lacewing for a Critter Collection, which we can actually complete now by simply catching a Truffle Worm.
And there we go. Every single critter. Huge. Okay, that puts us at 83.89%.
Santa was the last NPC entry to register in our Bestiary, and is a fairly easy NPC to get. At the time of recording, the Halloween event was going on, so to get Santa we have to reach wave 15 of the Frost Moon, then farm enemies for the Snow Globe, summon the Frost Legion, and wait. While I was at it, I also did a few extra Frost Legions to complete those entries.
While we're at it, I think I'm gonna go after these slimes.
Now, I already had most of these just from the natural progression of the game. The Diva Slime was the only one I'd yet to see, and that's because you have to go pretty far to your way to throw a Sparkle Slime balloon into the Shimmer. But that of course was easy enough to do. As I mentioned earlier, the bulk of this video was recorded in October during the Halloween event, so I was able to complete all of those Halloween variants through natural progression. However, the same cannot be said for the Christmas variant enemies. So, in order to complete those, we have to defeat the Frost Moon so that we can simulate the Christmas event for an in-game day. You could of course change your PC time to trick your game into thinking the event is active and bypass the Frost Moons.
We are actually done with the surface biome. So what I'm going to do from here is just go along each of these categories and then fill in what we don't have.
Most of these areas just had a few stragglers, if any at this point, and were very easy to finish. But we had a few filters, mainly events, that required more work. I skipped over the Sanguini staff in this run, so I haven't even touched Blood Moon fishing in Hardmode. We have the Hemoglobin Shark, Blood Eel, and Dread Nautilus to fish up. The Hemoglobin Shark required 25 kills, so that one was finished up pretty fast. Dread Nautilus's entry needed just 10 kills to complete, which was very fortunate for us because there are some much rarer mini-bosses coming up that don't quite extend that same courtesy. After a while, I realized the ads at this boss spawns have their own entry as well, which was rather interesting to deal with as a summoner. I have no bulk, and if my summons are up, the boss is killed way before it even gets a chance to summon them. So I just had to sit there and wait for them to spawn and then awkwardly whip them without dying. But thankfully, this entry also requires just 10 to fill in, so I was able to finish up everything related to the Dread Nautilus quicker than expected, leaving just the Blood Eel, which I would have never guessed to be the enemy holding us up, but just like the Hemoglobin Shark, this one requires 25 kills. However, it's significantly rarer to fish up, so this took quite some time. In the end, it took over 10 Blood Moons and 2 hours to complete. After using our statues and some Vile Powder to complete the Corrupt Critters, we could move on from this event. We then got back to work on the graveyard biome, where there was just one enemy. The Hop and Jack was formerly a Halloween event only spawn, but can now be spawned year-round with the graveyard. I should have expected this one to take pretty long, seeing as I've only killed 8 up until this point, and again, they could spawn the whole time because we're in the Halloween event, but it still surprised me to see this take nearly an hour of farming in the graveyard. I then completed the mushroom biome and defeated Duke Fishron to finish up the ocean. I don't know how I never realized this, but the Duke is the only addition to the ocean in Hardmode, something I was very relieved to see. I quickly finished up the underground jungle in our farm and killed a few more lizards to finish up the temple, before setting my sights on the dungeon. I will forever be grateful to 1.4.4 for adding shimmer and unsafe dungeon walls, because these entries would have been excruciatingly painful without being able to use our farm for this. All we had to do was switch up the walls behind the player and in front of the spawn area to farm all of the different enemy groups. It still took 3 hours to do, but I don't even want to think about how long this would have taken pre 1.4.4. Next up is the Goblin Army, which once again just added one additional enemy in Hardmode. However, this one is a mini boss, and as I hinted at before, this thing will require more than 10 kills. If I just let my current loadout run wild, I could easily do this event without seeing a single goblin summoner, so I had to disable my summons for this one. My strategy was to wait for the spawns to fill up, look for a summoner, and reload the world and try again if it didn't show up. This allowed me to quickly clear the spawns without actually progressing the event, maximizing the amount of goblin summoners I can get per goblin standard, which worked great, but not great enough. I had 3 standards to use, and averaged 8 summoners per goblin army with this method. That left us at 24 out of 25 on our last standard. So that was fun. While frustrating, it wasn't that big of a deal though, as it only took about 10 minutes to farm the tattered cloth and get our last summoner. I then moved on to the Old One's army, which I hadn't even touched yet in Hardmode. And I was expecting this one to take a long time because of that, but I was very relieved to see that this was not the case. Betsy is technically speaking a mini-boss. However, unlike all other mini-bosses, it drops a treasure bag in extra mode, something only bosses do. So it's in this weird gray area, and thank God it is, because that meant we only needed to kill 1 for the entry. As for the rest of the entries, they were very easy to fill in thanks to our summon loadout being exceptionally strong against this event. After just 20 minutes, we could move on to the pirates. I was expecting this one to play out similarly to the Goblin Army, but for some reason the Flying Dutchman also only required 1 kill to complete. I guess it doesn't drop a banner, and most of these bestiary entries align with the banner drop, but why this mini-boss in particular doesn't drop a banner, and the Dread Nautilus does, I'm not sure. But whatever the reason is, that's great news for us. Now the next rarest enemy is the Pirate Captain, however it's way more common than the Goblin Summoner, so this event just took a handful of minutes to finish up. So with that, we have 4 left before Pillars. We're really close to being done now. So we're going to do the Martians. That's next in the list. I don't envision this one being too bad, actually. And I was correct in my assumptions. It took just 3 invasions to complete, and because I could have my summons out the whole time, those invasions went by very fast. That just left the seasonal moon events to finish up before the Pillars. I had, of course, already farmed a ton of Pumpkin Moon for Summoner gear, so that didn't take too long to complete. The Frost Moon, on the other hand, I had done just once or twice. But the good news is, the spawn rates are really high during this event, so the ads will be completed very fast, and there are 3 mini-bosses, none of which drop a banner, so they'll just require 1 kill. They'll just require 1 kill, right? Yeah, no, they needed 50. Now, I understand they spawn quite frequently on the later waves of the event, but it was just weird to see the lack of consistency with these kill requirements on some of these entries. Why do we only have to kill 1 Dutchman, but then 10 Dread Nautilus, and 50 of these moon mini-bosses? While quite frustrating, I suppose the roller coaster of emotions that came with rolling up on a mini-boss and having absolutely no idea whether you can one and done them, or if you'll be there for 2 hours killing 50 of them, was pretty interesting. Okay. This is the last Santa NK1, and I believe, if we don't die, there we go. That's the last enemy we're missing. Yeah, you have to do 50 NK1s for this, so it took a good few invasions, but we did it. So yeah, that's 94.44%, and with that, we are up to the 4 last categories. Everything's completely filled in. We just have to do the Pillar event, and then we're done. Now, there's the Lunatic Cultist, and then the 2 enemies it spawns. I believe the Wyvern and the Cthulhu head thing. But I don't know how many we're going to have to kill. What we want to do is, I'm actually going to remove this summon. And we're going to wait until we get some enemies to spawn in. So this might be tricky. We probably should have gone a more defense-based
set up, but that's okay. So we want the cultist to do the ritual. We're going to allow it to summon things in. So we want the wyvern first. But we don't want to just kill it instantly. So this is where it's going to get tricky.
In order to spawn an Ancient Vision, the player must fail the ritual while a Phantasm Dragon is already up. So you have to fail 2 rituals in a row without killing the dragon beforehand. These conditions are incredibly hard to meet unless you go out of your way to do so, which is why I only just found out about this enemy's existence a couple years ago. After defeating each of the ads, I was way too low health to risk going for more, so I just decided to defeat the boss and cross my fingers.
Okay, we killed it. I have no idea if that's going to work. If we go to the dungeon entry. Nice, okay, they did show up, and we do have those entries complete.
Now, for whatever reason, these pillar entries only required 10 kills per enemy, so I was able to complete them without stalling much, if at all, after the shield went down.
So that is every entry. And as you can see, we're at 99.63% collected. We are so close. It's just the solar pillar and then Moonlord. But before we do that, I want to double check that I have every single entry completed. So the first enemy starts at the gnome, and I'm just going to go from there. Oh, that's such a silly one to be missing. What? So I'm glad I checked. I'm actually not done the lunatic devotee and the cultist archer.
Rather than defeating Moonlord and then having to farm the whole lunar event again, I had an idea. Because I've already completed all of the pillar entries and have enough fragments to craft the Moonlord summoning item, we don't actually need to fight the pillars again. Instead, we can defeat the final pillar and quit out before Moonlord spawns. Then we can go back to the dungeon, defeat all of the cultist lackeys, and quit once more before the cultist spawns. We then sleep 1 in-game day, and rinse and repeat until we have those entries filled in. This bypasses the cultist, the pillars, and also the anticlimactic ending of the cultist archer being the final entry to complete. Fortunately, for whatever reason, this enemy just requires 5 kills to complete, so sleeping that extra day wasn't even needed.
We are ready. I've got a few different setups I want to try for this fight. Based on how everything's performing. I've got a whip version where we get up close and use firecracker with the tiki set. And if that's not working and we're taking too much damage, I'll switch to spooky, which is a little scary because we lose a lot of bulk. However, we'll be able to hang back more and use the vortex speeder along with the Stardust Dragon because it's got really good range. All right, here we go. Wow, that's a lot of damage. Holy shit. So that works good. Okay, this is a little bit bad. Got away with it though. Okay, one more. Okay, now here I think I'm gonna switch back. Oh, we had spooky on still, which is silly. Okay, that's fine. Now we're gonna do this and finish it off. And we'll just go in close here. There we go. Done. Moonlord's defeated. And with that, I think we will have completed every single entry. 100% collected. There's Moonlord. All of these entries are done. We can click through any one on any of these pages. It's finally done. We have every critter like we set out to do. All the gold critters. Every single one on display there. And now we have all the enemies completed too. And for the first time ever, I will be able to buy the universal pylon. I've never gotten this before in game. I feel like it's a cool reward, but also like, I don't know, by the time you get it, right? I mean, it's not super useful. But it's neat. It's neat. There's a universal pylon now. Really, really cool. So the last thing I want to do is check how long this took. Because I'm not actually sure. I think it's well north of 100 hours for sure. but I don't know about the exact time.
If you made it this far, thank you so much for watching, and consider subscribing if you haven't already for more goofy challenge runs like this one. Peace.